Hey, everybody, this is Bob Goodwin, and welcome to another episode of Career Club Live. We are coming from you from Oslo, Norway today, believe it or not. So a little bit late in the evening here this time, but really glad that you've taken the opportunity to join us. If you are catching this episode on YouTube, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. We want to make sure that you see all the episodes as they come. We're publishing pretty much weekly these days, so we'd love to make sure that you got the opportunity to check out every episode. This week's episode is sponsored by Next Placement, which is Career Club's innovation in the outplacement business, where we're bringing a more human-centric, empathetic approach to helping employees transition to their next opportunity. You can learn more about that at career.club. Today's episode is going to be about Gen Z. It's a topic that I'm really interested in, and we're blessed to be able to have an expert in Gen Z. Our guest today is Anthony Onesto. I'm going to read this because this is a pretty interesting background. Anthony is the Chief People Officer at Suzy, which is an on-demand consumer research software platform. He's a leading expert on culture, human resources, and talent. He brings a unique approach to human resources using design thinking principles to bring a more human-centered organization. He's got years of experience in scaling, building culture, HR, and talent for fast growth technology and innovation companies, including a couple names I'm sure you know, FreshDirect and Razorfish. Also, and I hope we can talk about this in just a moment, in 2015, he founded Ella Adventures, a company that produces a comic book and cartoon series called Ella the Engineer. The purpose of the comic is to encourage young girls to pursue interests in science, technology, engineering, math, STEM, and entrepreneurship. So with that, I'd like to welcome Anthony Onesto. Anthony, welcome.
Hey, Bob. Thank you so much for having me. By the way, can you share all that great stuff with my mom? She still doesn't know what I do. Just kidding.
Anthony, what have you done with your life? No, that really great. So as is our want, and we're going to jump into our topic here in just a sec, but we usually do just a little 3 to 5 minute icebreaker. So folks can learn a little bit more about you as a human being besides the workplace professional that you are. So easy questions. Where were you born and raised?
So born and raised on Staten Island in New York. Very famous. Well, at least these days it was famous for the hip hop group, the Wu-Tang Clan, and now Pete Davidson, and also known for pizza. So I'll take all three of those.
And the Staten Island Ferry. That's what I think I was.
That's true. Right.
There you go. And then where'd you go to school?
Went to a small liberal arts school in South Jersey called Stockton. It was originally Stockton College of New Jersey, and now has university status. So, of course, that's now on my resume. I went to Stockton University.
The Stockton University what? What's the mascot for Stockton?
It's the osprey. It's an indigenous bird of the Pinelands down in New Jersey, and a very scary opponent if you're on a sports team.
Okay, there you go. And just a little bit about your family. You mentioned your mom.
Yeah. My mom, my dad, of Italian American descent, first generation here in the U.S., both born and raised in New York, and like most native New Yorkers, kind of stayed close to the New York area. I have a sister, and also, fun fact, my sister and I were both adopted at birth. So doing a lot of recent exploration of birth parents and lineage with 23andMe and Ancestry. So going through a lot of that fun discovery right now.
There are some amazing tools available to help people kind of understand their full story. So good on you. I think that's cool. Do you mind just painting just a little bit of a picture of your career arc for folks and how you ended up at Suzy?
Yeah, I don't. Arc is probably, I would say, more like sort of a 2-year-old drawing all over the place, accidental by any means. You talked about my Stockton University or Stockton College. I got a degree in accounting because my dad was an accountant. He said you'd always find a job. It's kind of right one of the many times. And I was a failed accountant. The first year, I really didn't like doing accounting, and the company I worked for said I was pretty bad at it, so they fired me. So career-changing move, and I didn't know what to do. Like, in New York at the time, you went into financial services. It's what you did, and it didn't feel like the right place for me culturally. And so I went back to the recruiting firm and said, hey, what can I do? They said, why don't you come work for us and be a recruiter? And thus my career in HR started in doing recruiting externally for companies, and really started driving a lot of recruiting and HR consulting with a bunch of these tech companies. If you remember the dot-com boom and bust.
Yep.
So all of these tech companies that were starting, it was just such a fun time. And I got bit by the startup bug. So I got bit by the HR recruiting bug and then the startup bug, and have been doing that. I like to say I got my PhD in startup for about 20 years here in New York, working with various startups and mostly within the HR, the operations, and the recruiting functions.
No, that's cool. And, just super quick on the failed at accounting thing. Just like often when we're giving advice to, college graduates, people who are, very young in their career, it's almost a test for negatives, right? It's like, find out what you don't like. At least don't go do any more of that. You may not still know exactly which instrument you want to play in orchestra or which sport you want to play, but at least figure out what you don't like and don't do that anymore. And then you're very fortunate that the right things found you and you found them. So that's cool.
It's really good advice. And I will say that the experience and the education has played an incredible part in how I look at HR, especially from a numbers perspective. And I always love shocking heads of finance or CFOs when I ask them for financial statements and can read them. So it's a party game, which is often fun.
God forbid an HR person has some business acumen.
Imagine that.
Yeah. So normally we sort of ask a random question around hobbies or what do you do when you're not at work. But I would really like for you to share a little bit more with folks about Ella, the engineer, and the inspiration behind that.
Sure. Well, I appreciate it. I have sort of creative juices that are constantly flowing. So I'm always doing creative things other than coaching my kids or playing basketball or watching. But Ella stemmed from an experience I had years ago where I was working for a global technology company and realized that of the 1,000 employees that we had globally, there was a handful of women. It was just a very surprising stat to me, and something that itched on my brain for a couple of weeks. I just didn't know, like, was this my company's issue? Yeah. Were we filtering out women? And what I came to find out with, research, which means I Google searched, was that, there was this place within early age girls where they were just not, all of a sudden became disinterested in these STEM topics. Of course, STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. Of course, I'm focused mostly on the math and the technology, since the company I worked for was a tech and data sciences company. And so I said, I have to do something about this. I have to do something as the head of HR, where we want more women in the short term, but I also want to affect the community in the longer term. Yeah. And it was a bit self-serving too, because obviously in the longer term, I'd still be recruiting for technology folks. I said, how do I do that? And someone told me the story of Ally McBeal. If you remember, maybe some folks on the call, Ally McBeal was a legal show, a very popular legal show where they had a female lead as a lawyer. And the result of that was a 20 to 30% increase in the amount of women that went into law school. So it just showed you the power of media and entertainment on things that weren't really even related to it. It was the legal profession, and one thing that they probably didn't intend on happening, and it did. So I said, you know what, entertainment's the key. All my kids who are now teenagers were much younger when I started this. And I said, I have to do something in like the kids show area. And I started a comic book. I was instructed by really smart people. Hey, you're not going to get an animated series. You're not going to walk into a producer's office and say, hey, I have a great idea. Why don't you take some baby steps and do something incremental? And they told me to do a comic book. I've never done one. I've never written a comic book. I don't draw. Smarter people, by the way, did all of that for me. But I was blessed with Razorfish was a company I worked for. They sponsored the original comic, and now Deloitte, global consulting firm, has sponsored 5-6 different comic books, a graphic novel. They've just been an incredible partner in helping us bring Ella the engineer to life, which has been great. And now we're we're pitching this week animated series. So getting to that final stage of that potential animated series piece.
So if people want to access the comic book or any other assets, how do they do that?
Great. Thanks for asking. TheEllaProject.com. They can go there. They can also see real women in STEM that we've interviewed. So what we wanted to do is bring the real women into the comic book and then the real women onto the website. And then there's a series of different tabs you can go into and download the comics for free. So we always wanted to make these available to anyone, anywhere digitally. And you can get that through the website.
Anthony, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And it's really nice to see you sharing a lot of your talent in a different way and making a kind of generational impact. So that's cool. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Speaking of generations, Gen Z. So you wrote a book, and it's called The New Employee Contract, How to Find, Keep, and Elevate Gen Z Talent. And do you mind just maybe spending a minute kind of why that book and why now?
Yeah, great bunch of questions. Do you do this often? No, I'm teasing.
I'm thinking of starting to do this more regularly.
You might want to start. So COVID comes in and have a bunch of time. Can't really do anything on the weekends. You're stuck in your home. A lot of folks manifested that into many different things, and I felt like there was going to be a renaissance of ways from a creative perspective. And I started doing what I voice to text on my phone of a bunch of ideas I had about the new employee contract, about this contract that is unwritten between employees and employers, this agreement that we've had. So I started doing some research on just employment in general and the history of employment and employment relations. And really started to dig in, but the spirit of it was this situation that happened to my father years ago. He worked for the same company his entire career, something I don't think we'll ever see again in our lifetime. And at the end, towards the end of his career, he was asked to reapply for his own job and didn't get it and was forced into retirement. So here's a person that was doing a job forever, asked to reapply, didn't get his own job, and then forced to retire, which ultimately was the reason why was they wanted him to retire. They wanted to maybe pay less for his position. And it was a very short-term view on his contract with that company. And I said, something's not right here. And that impacted my family, impacted me as a young adult. And so I've always wanted to explore that. So I took the opportunity to explore that, but I didn't want to just make a comment on how this contract has eroded. Originally, many years ago, decades ago, there was a contract. You hire me, I do work for you, you pay me, but it was like a community. A lot of the businesses back in the day were rooted in their communities. It was not only a family, but it was this unwritten contract that, maybe I would give you more things than just a paycheck, and you would give more things than just your labor. And what has happened over the last bunch of decades, I think mostly in the late 70s, early 80s, when we started really focusing on short-term gains, is the contract has eroded. It's now literally become a contract. You give me salary, and you give me labor, I give you salary, and maybe you'll get promotions and other things. But for the most part, that sort of contract has eroded. And I wanted to make a statement about that, but not only like a high level macro statement, but I wanted to do it with some sort of, okay, what's the action? What do we need to do to solve for this? And what I found in my research as I was thinking about the next generation coming into the workforce, Gen Z, that these two worlds, my POV and the research we did on Gen Z, lined up perfectly, almost perfectly. And I said, all right, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to make a statement about this contract that has eroded, how companies really need to start thinking differently about the employee relationship or their relationship with employees. I'm going to do it through the lens of Generation Z. And that lined up absolutely perfectly.
Wow. Well, obviously, as a demographic cohort, it's going to be the largest part of the kind of workforce. And yet it seems to, we were teasing a little bit right before we came on, but like an enigma, like people don't understand it. But at the same time, if you're a boomer, Gen X and millennials, we're like, what the heck are they? And then hopefully we kind of figure millennials out anyway. But then it's like two things. One is Gen Z. Well, here's another thing that people don't understand quite as well. And then maybe the derivative of this isn't just new millennials. This is a different generation. So could you talk a little bit about just some of the demographic and psychographic attributes of Gen Z and what makes them really a unique demographic set?
Sure, absolutely. And when we think of it as the exact dates, 2007, 2014-ish, I think, around there, maybe a little bit earlier, depending on where you research. One of the biggest, when we talk about generations, I want to be clear, like every generation, every individual is going to be very specific and personalized. So some of what we talk about may resonate, some of it may resonate a little bit or a lot, but for the most part, what we talk about and what I talk about in research in the book applies to this generation because of the experiences and the norms that they've gone through. So this generation is, if you think about the world that they were born into. So first of all, iPhone was launched. This generation grew up with a mobile device that had a very beautiful experience that was super easy to use. I remember my kids when they were super young. We had an iPad. We gave it to one of my kids. How they intuitively knew to kind of just do this. And it was just amazing. And you see how kids interact with these technologies. So one of the articles I was interviewed for, I said they were born with the iPhone in their hand. Of course not, I was figuratively speaking, but they were. Like, this generation has unprecedented access to information mobily, which, if you think about that, gives them unprecedented access to anything that they want. They've also grown up in an age where they can get anything they want. If you think of Amazon Prime, I can order anything, get it. I remember a time where we actually had to wait for something in the mail. It was the anticipation of getting that gift. Or I remember a time specifically where when I logged into the internet, it made this crackling noise. And if a phone call came in, I would get kicked off of the internet and the page would load, the loading page would take forever. Like these were things that I, as a Generation X, went through, and they became normal for me. That's normal. Anything better than that is great, right? This is the greatest thing ever. Like, I have unprecedented access to information. So they've seen the, technology and digital absolutely critical. And it's got to be, this generation is majority iPhones. So a lot of them understand design, right? The importance of user experience.
Oh, you mean a brand, just to be clear, Anthony, you mean the brand, not just a smartphone, but an Apple iPhone.
The brand. Absolutely, the brand.
Okay.
Yep. And that's where the beauty of design, the aesthetics of design from a digital perspective, not only just the phone from a hardware perspective. So they're digital, they were born digital, they were born mobile, access to information at their fingertips. They've seen recessions through their parents, right? So they have seen economic uncertainty. And now, frankly, some of them that are in the workforce are seeing it firsthand. Absolutely had an impact on them. Climate change. I remember a time when Al Gore stood up, did his climate change conversation and his big presentation, right? But we're starting, we know a time where we hadn't seen so much complexity and changes in the environment firsthand. Listen, we've had our hurricanes, we've had our rain, we've had hot summers, but we haven't seen it at the frequency this generation has. They're experiencing this firsthand. So their desire around climate change, super important. Racial equity. They've seen it again firsthand, these things playing out in the world. So a lot of these things that you and I and assumably other generations would kind of compromise on certain things for other things, this generation is not compromising, right? There are, of course, different wants and different desires based on the human that you're talking to. But overall, this generation is absolutely, like you said, it's going to be a very different generation than we've seen in the past.
Okay. And can you talk just a little bit about the role that social media plays for Gen Z?
Yeah, of course. I think, again, if you have instant access to information, that's really, it's not there's a lot of surveys, there's a lot of studies being done about the impact of social media on the lives of Gen Z. Of course, there are definitely negative impacts. Professor Galloway is pushing a lot of this effort and a lot of data to support these things, right? It's also unlimited access to information. They can see the world. I like to do these things as this is them and this is what I remember, the customs, right? I had to go to the library and look up this sort of file index to find a book. It took me, it was almost, not for me specifically, but a deterrent for some people who would want to read, trying to find books. And it's just very difficult to get access to these things. Imagine, I had to look into an encyclopedia to learn a little bit more about the world. They don't. It's actually the world is pushed in front of them. Twitter, they see things going on in other countries, Instagram, TikTok. We talked a little bit in the pre-show about attention spans, right? Yeah. This idea of getting quick information at access to, so social media in all of the different fundamentals of why people go on social media, it's also been so beneficial for this generation to see events play out in real time, especially on video. And these events are global, where people are fighting for rights in different countries. They can see it in our own country with some of the racial inequity they're seeing in other cities, some riots, whatever it is, they're seeing it firsthand. So while there are some negative impacts of social media, no question, there have been really some things where now they're exposed so much that it's actually formulating their global view.
Okay, so now let's start trying to put this in the context of I'm an employer and I might be a hiring manager, I might be a CEO, I might be an HR executive. What are some of the implications, Anthony, of what you've just been describing to us for the past few minutes?
Yeah, so many. First thing I just want to, and I talk about this a lot in these sessions, because I think it's really important to take a step back. So what typically happens, we've seen it in business, we've seen it in life, whenever a new idea comes into our existing construct, the minute it comes into our construct, and if maybe it's counter to what we believe in or counter to the way we behave, we attack it. Right? It's like, no, that idea, that's a crap idea. Or you've probably seen some of the articles about millennials. They're lazy, or they're job jumpers, or these Gen Z are entitled. We're seeing it. I have a Google alert, Gen Z. I see it constantly. And actually I use it for a lot of my TikTok videos, because my first advice for anyone in these positions is to listen and try to understand. Do your research before you make a judgment on this generation. Now, Mark Cuban has done a lot of research on Gen Z and calls it potentially one of the greatest generations. Time will tell, and we'll see what happens with his prediction there. But do the research, and it sounds self-serving, and a bit is grab my book and learn about what is it about this gen. Before we go into like, hey, Gen Z is this or Gen Z is that, let's first learn about the generation first. Let's figure out why. What are all these things? Because they have so many tentacles. You talked about the impact. So first of all, recruiting, right? So my book, the subtitle is also a little secret into how I manage human resources, which is under 3 pillars: find, keep, and elevate. So it's recruiting, it's sort of all the HR stuff in the middle, and elevate is the learning and development and the growth and the performance piece of HR. So let's start with find, just as an example. So recruiting. If we think about the digital savviness of this generation and start auditing our recruiting processes, you will find so many gaps. Right. So when I go to your website, not yours particularly, but any company website, and I want to apply for the job, how many clicks does it take me to just get to your job description before I even apply? 3, 4, 7, 10, who knows? This generation, one click can get an Amazon package within an hour. One click can get access to global information, to situations happening on a global basis, right? So when we look at the attention span specifically, which has been, it's been in articles lately. Yes, the headline is great for clicks. They have an 8-second attention span. Yes. Is it true? Yes. but it's because of the custom norms that they've grown up with. They're on to the next thing. Right. So now think about how that applies to your recruiting process. If you're not going from click to application within one step, you're losing a cohort of individuals for your organization. So there are so many examples of that, by the way, Bob, across all these sort of things that I provide in the book. These are examples, and it starts with attracting talent to your organization.
No, that's great. And I would think that even the channel of how you're recruiting, you mentioned TikTok, you mentioned Twitter, just being text-based. Like texting is just like their native tongue, right? And even the channel that you're recruiting on, is it a channel where you're going to find them and where they want to be found in their preferred channels to communicate, right? So it's like, well, we've got this big clunky desktop application that the mobile version of it kind of sucks, but that was just part of the package. It does it. And then somebody's like, I'm holding up my iPhone right now. This is like my go-to entry into the world, and you're not optimized for this and how I want to interact with you. To your point, you're on the back foot before you even start.
Right. And that's a key. Like, I love the way you put it. You're on your back foot, because you could ignore the advice in the book. I suggest you don't, especially now that more of company value, if not all of it, is based on people. And we could talk about the demographic issues that are plaguing the world and all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, finding, attracting people, even during a downturn that we're seeing now, is still going to be a key factor in your company's success. If you're on the back foot, you can ignore what I tell you to do. I'm not, and some people will. Some people are like, I'm not doing that. This generation should find me, not us find them. Fine, you're at a disadvantage. Like, who would want to start a race tied with, have your legs tied together? Like, that's what you're doing. Like, you're tying it. You're like, don't ignore the fact that this is the cultural. You may not agree with it. That's the other thing. I'm not asking folks to agree. Oh, they're always on their mobiles, they're texting. This is how they operate. This is the cultural norms for this generation. And either you're going to acclimate, or they're going to find someone else who has.
You just used the word operate, and immediately where my mind went was they're on a different operating system, right? And if you're like kind of in a Unix world and they're on iOS 16 point whatever, it's like they're just it's not right and wrong. It's just different. They're on a different operating system. Yeah. And on the recruiting bit, you're kind of like proceed at your own peril. Like, if you don't want to play the game, it's, boomers are aging out of the workforce pretty significantly, and will for quite a while yet. It's like, all right, well, what's coming in to replace them? And to your point, you can rage against a machine and go, well, they're lazy and they've got the attention span of a goldfish and whatever. But there's a tech savvy, wants to be motivated, really strong cohort that if you're like, yeah, no, well, you do that at your own risk.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And if you think about it, it even applies. I would argue whoever's questioning this, I would ask them, or I would love to observe them on a customer support call, or, like, nobody wants to 1,000 click to anything, right? So whatever, the most interesting thing, and we're going to go over a bunch of different sort of, wants that this generation has. I was actually on a webinar, and someone put in the chat, asked a question and said, are they asking for too much? And so my response was, okay, I'm going to list all the things that they want. Now we're talking about, your company being diverse, your company's position on climate change. They want, work-life balance. They want, an easier application process. If we want to get super detailed, let me know which one of these is not good for the world, or none of these. Ask one of the problem is, our cultural norms is we did not ask for these things. We did not make these non-negotiables. We said, all right, we'll deal with your recruiting process. I came in to the workforce in 96. It was an employer market. They had the advantage. And so whatever they wanted me to do, hey, you want to, do whatever, twirl around, whatever it was. Yes, of course I'll do that. Whatever you need. It's a very different world. So it's just interesting, like, which one of these things is not good for the world that they want, and which one should we take off? It's just really fascinating when you talk to folks.